8 Marines hit the sand in 45 seconds. The last one was still gasping when the laughter died. 43 witnesses stood frozen around the combat pit at Camp Pendleton, their smirks replaced by something closer to fear. The woman who had just dismantled their best fighters wiped blood from her knuckles and did not smile. Evelyn Thorne was 20 years old, weighed 118 pounds, and had just done something impossible. But to understand how it happened, you have to go back 5 days. Master Sergeant James Callahan had been running the Marine Combat Instructor course for 11 years. He had trained over 400 Marines in close quarters combat. He had broken bones, shattered egos, and built warriors from recruits who arrived thinking they knew how to fight. He had never once questioned his ability to identify weakness on sight. The moment Evelyn Thorne walked through the door of Building 247, he knew she did not belong. She stood at the back of the formation with her shoulders hunched and her eyes fixed on the floor. Her physical training uniform hung loose on a frame that carried no visible muscle. She looked like a bureaucratic error given human form. Callahan checked his roster twice. Staff Sergeant Evelyn Thorne, age 20, current billet administrative support. Martial arts qualification green belt earned 18 months prior. No combat deployments, no special operations background. Nothing that explained why she was standing in a room full of infantry, Marines, reconnaissance operators, and decorated combat veterans. He walked directly to her position. The sound of his boots on concrete made several candidates straighten. Evelyn did not move. Staff Sergeant Thorne, she looked up. Those pale gray eyes met his for exactly 2 seconds before returning to the floor. Something about them made Callahan pause, though he could not have explained why. Yes, Master Sergeant. Her voice was quiet, steady but quiet, the voice of someone trying not to be noticed. Your records show you're an admin clerk from Camp Pendleton. Green belt, no combat experience. He let the words hang. Around the room, 42 other candidates were listening. Some were already smirking. I was approved for transfer, Master Sergeant. My paperwork is complete. I didn't ask about your paperwork. I asked why you're here. She chose her words carefully. I want to become an instructor, Master Sergeant. Laughter rippled through the formation. Not loud, but present. The kind that said everything without saying anything. Callahan's jaw tightened. This course produces Marines who will teach other Marines how to survive hand-to-hand combat. We don't produce participation trophies. We don't lower standards for anyone. He leaned closer. If you can't handle what happens here, leave now. Save yourself the embarrassment. I understand, Master Sergeant. Do you? Because looking at you right now, I see someone who's going to wash out before the weekends. Evelyn said nothing. Her eyes held his for exactly 2 seconds before returning to the floor. Callahan walked away, already dismissing her from his thoughts. She would be gone within days. He had no idea how wrong he was. Staff Sergeant Derek Kane had been waiting for this moment since he saw her name on the roster 3 days ago. He was 34 years old, a reconnaissance Marine with 2 combat deployments and a 3rd-degree black belt, earned through years of training that left scars on his knuckles and his opponents. Callahan had selected him as assistant instructor because he understood how to push candidates to their limits. He also understood how to break them. Kane approached Evelyn during the first break, positioning himself close enough that she had to step back against the wall. You're the admin clerk. It was not a question. Staff Sergeant Thorne, Staff Sergeant, I know who you are. Kane's smile carried no warmth. What I don't know is who you convinced to approve your transfer. Must have been persuasive. My qualifications met the requirements, Staff Sergeant. Your qualifications? Kane's laugh was sharp. You have a green belt in a desk job. Half the candidates in this course have combat experience. Some have killed people with their hands. You're going to stand in a pit with them and pretend you belong. I'm going to complete the training, Staff Sergeant. No, you're not. He stepped closer. This is where Marines get hurt for real. When you wash out, and you will remember that some of us tried to warn you. He walked away. Evelyn watched him go. Her hands remained at her sides, relaxed. Her breathing remained steady. But behind those colorless eyes, something shifted. A calculation, a measurement of distance, timing, and vulnerability. She had been underestimated before. She had learned to use it. The first training session began at 800 in the combat pit behind Building 247. 43 candidates stood in formation around a rectangle of packed sand roughly 40 feet by 20. Wooden railings surrounded the pit, worn smooth from decades of violence. Callahan stood at the center. This pit has trained Marines for 30 years. It has seen broken bones, separated shoulders, and more blood than any of you want to imagine. What happens here prepares you for the moment when technique is the difference between survival and a flag-draped coffin. He paused. Today, we assess baseline capability, controlled grappling, takedowns and escapes. Tap to submit. His eyes swept the formation. Staff Sergeant Kane will pair you with partners. Kane worked through the roster, methodically matching candidates by size and experience. Then he reached Evelyn's name. Thorne. He looked up with that cold smile. You'll partner with Corporal Fisher. A murmur passed through the candidates. Ryan Fisher was 6 feet 2 inches tall and weighed 220 pounds. He had served 3 combat deployments, held a second-degree black belt, and was known throughout the battalion for training sessions that sent opponents to medical. He was also known for not controlling his intensity. Fisher stepped forward. His massive frame cast a shadow across Evelyn's position. Seriously, Kane nodded. Controlled grappling, takedowns and escapes. This isn't even going to be a drill. Fisher cracked his knuckles. It's going to be a demonstration. Evelyn stepped onto the sand without hesitation. The other candidates gathered around the pit's edge, already anticipating what would happen. Callahan observed from the far side. He told himself he was allowing the system to work. If she could not handle peer pressure, she could not handle training Marines. What he failed to understand was that Evelyn Thorne had already discovered her limits in environments where failure meant death. Fisher attacked immediately. He shot forward with a double-leg takedown, driving his shoulder into Evelyn's midsection with the force of a train. No technique, no finesse. Pure, overwhelming power designed to slam her into the sand and establish dominance. Evelyn went down hard. Her back hit the packed sand with an impact that drove the air from her lungs. Fisher's weight pressed down 220 pounds of muscle and aggression, pinning her to the ground. He transitioned to mount knees, driving into her biceps, hands pressing toward her throat. Tap out, he said. Evelyn's palm hit the sand. Fisher held position for 2 extra seconds before releasing. When he stood, his face showed satisfaction. Not of victory, but of confirmation. Stay down next time, he said. Save yourself the trouble. Laughter from the candidates, not cruel laughter. Knowing laughter. The laughter of people who had just watched their assumptions confirmed. Evelyn rose slowly, brushing sand from her shorts. Her ribs ached. Her arms throbbed. But her face showed nothing. She had lost deliberately. 2 years ago, her instructors had taught her a principle most fighters never learned. The greatest advantage in combat was being underestimated. Let them see weakness. Let them believe they understood your limitations. Then when it mattered, become something they never anticipated. Evelyn Thorne was not here to prove anything to Ryan Fisher. Not yet. The next 3 days followed a pattern Evelyn had anticipated. Kane critiqued her form during every session. His corrections were technically accurate, but delivered with a tone suggesting hopelessness. Your footwork is slow, your balance is wrong, your transitions are sloppy. Each comment designed to reinforce the narrative that she did not belong. Fisher made contact during striking drills with force exceeding what the exercises required. His jabs left bruises on her arms. His kicks targeted her ribs with precision that could not be accidental. Each impact a reminder that she was surrounded by predators. Other candidates stopped including her in conversations. They grouped for meals without inviting her. They formed study partnerships without acknowledging her presence. The isolation was systematic, coordinated without explicit coordination. Evelyn accepted all of it. She arrived early to every session. She performed every drill with effort that appeared to fall short. She asked questions that seemed naive. She presented herself as exactly what they expected, a misplaced clerk who had wandered into a world she did not understand. At night, in the 8x10 room that served as her quarters, she trained. The movements were silent, precise, drawn from training that appeared in no Marine Corps manual. Krav Maga techniques that Israeli instructors had drilled into her muscle memory. Systema principles that a former Russian operative had taught her during sessions that left her body screaming. Filipino blade patterns that translated seamlessly to empty hand combat. She moved through sequences designed for one purpose, ending threats with maximum efficiency and minimum exposure. By the 4th day, her body was covered in bruises, her uniform concealed. Her ribs protested with every breath. Her shoulders ached from takedowns applied with force beyond what training required. None of it mattered. Pain was an old companion. On the afternoon of the 4th day, someone new arrived at the training compound. Gunnery Sergeant Margaret Sullivan was 56 years old. She had served in the First Gulf War as a scout sniper, one of the first women to hold that military occupational specialty. She carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing left to prove. Silver streaked through her dark hair, and her face showed the weathering of 3 decades in hard places. She was a guest instructor, brought in to observe the current course and provide feedback. Callahan respected her. Kane feared her, though he would never admit it. Sullivan spent the afternoon watching candidates run through grappling drills. She said nothing, made no notes, just observed with the kind of attention that made people nervous. When the session ended, she approached Evelyn. Staff Sergeant Thorne. Evelyn turned. For a moment, her carefully constructed mask slipped. She recognized something in Sullivan's eyes, the way a predator recognizes another predator. Gunnery Sergeant. Walk with me. They moved away from the pit. Sullivan did not speak until they were out of earshot. I've been watching you for 3 hours. You move wrong. Evelyn's heart rate increased, but her face remained neutral. I don't understand, Gunnery Sergeant. Yes, you do. Sullivan stopped walking. Your hip positioning when you take falls, the way you distribute your weight during groundwork, those aren't the movements of someone with a green belt. Those are the movements of someone who's been trained by people who don't appear in any Marine Corps program. Silence. I knew a woman once, Sullivan continued. She moved like you, perfect economy of motion, nothing wasted. She could drop men twice her size and make it look effortless. Evelyn's composure cracked just for a second. Her name was Catherine Blackwood. You familiar with that name, Staff Sergeant? The world narrowed to this moment. I served under her, Gunnery Sergeant. Sullivan nodded slowly. Then you know what you're capable of. Question is, when do these fools learn? Evelyn looked back toward the pit where Fisher and Kane were laughing about something, where 42 Marines were convinced they understood exactly who she was. Soon, Gunnery Sergeant. Very soon. Sullivan smiled, not a kind smile, the smile of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen. Good. Kate Blackwood deserves better than having her legacy hidden behind a desk. Show them what she taught you. She walked away, leaving Evelyn alone with thoughts of a woman no longer alive to see what her training had created. That evening, Kane made an announcement. Unofficial pit session tomorrow night, 1900 hours. Candidates only. The emphasis on candidates was deliberate. The exclusion was clear. It'll be rough, Kane continued, not looking at Evelyn. Real sparring, real contact. Not for tourists playing soldier. The message was received. Evelyn was not invited. Evelyn was not wanted. She said nothing, just listened. When the announcement ended, she overheard Fisher talking to a group near the barracks. Finally get to see some real fighting without babysitting the admin princess. Should be a good session. Laughter, agreement, anticipation. Evelyn walked to her room without reacting, closed the door, sat on the edge of her rack, and for the first time in 5 days allowed herself to feel the anger she had been suppressing. Not anger at Fisher, not anger at Kane, not even anger at Callahan. Anger at the world that required this performance, that forced her to hide what she was in order to be accepted for what she could teach. She pulled the photograph from beneath her pillow. 2 women standing in front of a mud brick wall. The background was Libya, though the location would never appear in any official record. The older woman had silver hair and a face lined with 52 years of hard living. The younger woman was 19, thinner than she was now, with eyes that had not yet seen what they would see 6 months later in Yemen. Catherine Blackwood and Evelyn Thorne, mentor and student, master and apprentice. I'm not ready to use it yet, Kate, Evelyn whispered to the photograph. But tomorrow. Tomorrow, stop hiding. She set the photograph aside and began to train. The movements were different now, not careful practice. This was preparation. The final rehearsal before the performance began. Krav Maga sequences designed for opponents larger and stronger. Systema principles for managing multiple attackers. Judo throws optimized for maximum impact with minimum effort. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu submissions that could end a fight in seconds. Every technique she had learned from instructors whose names appeared in no official records. Every principle Kate Blackwood had drilled into her until they became instinct rather than thought. By the time she finished, it was past midnight. Her body was warm, loose, ready. Her mind was clear. Tomorrow night, 43 Marines would learn something they were not prepared to understand. Tomorrow night, the admin clerk would disappear. Tomorrow night, the ghost would return. The 5th day began with a 5-mile formation run at 0600. Evelyn positioned herself in the middle of the pack, matching the pace of candidates around her, revealing nothing. Fisher ran alongside for the final mile. His breathing was controlled despite the exertion. Try to keep up, desk jockey, he said as he accelerated past her. Evelyn matched his pace effortlessly. Her breathing remained steady, Her stride remained economical. She pulled alongside him and maintained position for 30 seconds before dropping back. Fisher glanced back, confusion flickering across his face. How was she keeping up? She was supposed to be struggling. Evelyn saw the confusion and said nothing. Let him wonder. Let him doubt. Tonight all his questions would be answered. The morning training focused on striking combinations. Kane demonstrated proper form, then had candidates pair up for practice. Controlled contact, Kane announced. This isn't the pit session tonight. Save your energy. The emphasis on tonight was deliberate. A reminder of what was coming. A reminder that Evelyn was not invited. She partnered with a female corporal named Hayes, one of the few who had not actively participated in her isolation. They worked through combinations in silence. Evelyn threw strikes with the same apparent mediocrity she had been displaying all week. Slow, uncoordinated, harmless. Hayes said nothing, but Evelyn could see the judgment in her eyes. Let her think it. Let them all think it. For a few more hours. At 1400 hours, Callahan called Evelyn to his office. She reported as ordered, standing at attention. The office was sparse. A few photographs on the wall, Callahan with various training classes over the years. A Marine Corps flag, a rack of martial arts belts representing his progression over 3 decades. Staff Sergeant Thorne, I'm giving you one exit. Evelyn remained at attention. This course has broken Marines tougher than you look. I've seen infantry sergeants with combat experience wash out because they couldn't handle the physical demands. I've seen reconnaissance operators quit because the mental pressure became too much. He stood, walked around the desk, studied her face. You could finish your enlistment comfortably. Admin work, regular hours. No one would judge you. With respect, Master Sergeant, I'm not leaving. Why, what's the point of this? What are you trying to prove? Evelyn met his eyes directly for the first time since arriving. The woman who trained me believed I could do more than survive. I owe it to her memory to prove it. Something in her voice made Callahan pause. There was steel there, not stubbornness or pride. Something deeper. Something forged in heat he could not imagine. Tonight, 1900 the pit. I'll be watching. If you're hiding something, it'll come out. Yes, Master Sergeant. Dismissed. Evelyn left knowing that Callahan suspected something. Not the truth. The truth was beyond anything he could anticipate, but something. Good. Let him question. In a few hours, all questions would be answered. At 17:30 hours, Evelyn returned to her room. She had 90 minutes before the pit session began. 90 minutes to prepare mentally for what came next. She sat on the edge of her rack, controlled her breathing, let her mind settle into the stillness that preceded violence. This was not meditation. This was not relaxation. This was the calm combat athletes cultivated before stepping into the arena. The state where nerves became focus and fear became fuel. Around the compound, other candidates were preparing differently. Some were warming up, loosening muscles, shadowboxing. Others were psyching themselves up, talking about who they wanted to face. Kane was briefing a select group in private. Fisher and 6 others, all skilled fighters. The admin clerk is going to show up tonight, Kane said. His voice was low, conspiratorial. We need to send a message. What kind of message? This from Corporal Blake Patterson, 6 feet 1 inch fast hands, actual training. 4-on-1, hard contact within the rules. Make it hurt. She quits or she learns this isn't a place for people playing soldier. Sergeant Kyle Warner hesitated. Callahan wants Marines who can survive real combat. If she can't handle 4 of us in controlled sparring, she dies first contact downrange. We're doing her a favor. The logic was sound if you accepted the premise. If you believed Evelyn Thorne was what she appeared to be. They agreed. 4-on-1. Kane would lead. Warner Corporal Jackson Voss and Sergeant Nolan Cross would support. All black belts, all confident. What they did not know was that James Callahan was standing in the hallway outside. He had heard every word. He had a choice to make. He chose to see what she was made of. At 18:55 hours, Evelyn Thorne walked to the combat pit. Portable floodlights had been positioned, turning the sand into a pale arena against the darkening California sky. 43 Marines formed a rough circle around the packed earth. Some sat on wooden railings, others stood with arms crossed. Kane stood at the pit's edge, his black belt wrapped around his waist. Look who decided to show up. Evelyn walked to the opposite side without responding. She was barefoot now. Her hair was tied back tight. No loose strands, no distractions. Her eyes had changed. That colorless gray had become something else, something focused and predatory. Margaret Sullivan stood at the back of the crowd, partially hidden in shadow. She saw the change in Evelyn's posture, the shift from hunted to hunter, and smiled. Kane announced the rules. Controlled contact. Tap to submit. No strikes to throat, groin, or spine. Everything else is fair. He paused, eyes finding Evelyn across the pit. Questions. She shook her head. The first bout matched two infantry sergeants who had been trading insults all week. The fight lasted 40 seconds before one tapped to an armbar. The second bout went longer, ending when a rear naked choke forced submission. The crowd's energy built with each exchange. Then Kane pointed directly at Evelyn. New girl, you're up. She stepped onto the sand. Her feet sank slightly into the packed surface, cool against her bare soles. The floodlights cast sharp shadows across the faces of Marines gathered around the pit. 43 sets of eyes watching, waiting, expecting exactly what they had expected from the moment she arrived. Her first opponent was Ryan Fisher. He stepped into the pit with the confidence of a man who had already defeated her once. 220 pounds of muscle and aggression rolling his shoulders, cracking his neck. He looked down at her with an expression that mixed amusement with anticipation. Ready for round two? Evelyn did not respond. Her hands hung relaxed at her sides. Her weight was distributed evenly across both feet. Her breathing was slow, controlled, and visible. Callahan had pushed through the crowd to the pit's edge. He stood with his arms crossed, observing, not intervening. This should be quick, someone said. Fisher shot forward. The double-leg takedown was identical to his first attack, driving for her midsection with overwhelming power. The technique that had slammed her into the sand on day one, that had established his dominance, that had confirmed everything they believed about her. Evelyn did not go down. She sprawled, dropping her hips, driving her weight onto his shoulders. Before he could adjust, before his mind could process that something was different, her arms snaked around his neck. The guillotine choke locked before he understood what was happening. Her forearm pressed against his throat. Not the windpipe, the carotid arteries. Israeli close quarters combat doctrine. Compression of blood flow to the brain. 7 to 10 seconds to unconsciousness without a tap. Her other hand secured the grip. Figure 4 lock. Her hips blocked his movement. Her legs controlled his base. The technique was textbook, but the application was something else entirely. Speed that seemed impossible. Precision that left no margin for escape. Control that came from muscle memory, built through thousands of repetitions. Fisher struggled. His hands clawed at her arm. His body thrashed against her control. His 220 pounds of muscle meant nothing against technique this refined. 3 seconds that must have felt like an eternity. His palm slapped the sand. Evelyn released immediately. Stepped back, her breathing barely elevated. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Fisher rose. His face was flushed from the choke and from something else. Humiliation, disbelief. He stared at her like he was seeing someone he had never encountered before. Because he was. The admin clerk with the hunched shoulders and nervous energy was gone. In her place stood something they had not anticipated, something they were not prepared to understand. Next, Kane said, his voice had lost its cold confidence. The second opponent was Corporal Blake Patterson, 6 feet 1 inch faster than Fisher, with footwork that showed genuine training. He did not rush. He circled, probing with jabs, testing her reactions. Patterson had been watching. He had seen what happened to Fisher. He was not going to make the same mistake. He would be smart, technical, use his reach advantage and superior speed to keep her at distance. Evelyn waited. Her head movement was minimal, just enough. Her eyes tracked Patterson's shoulder, not his hands. The shoulder would tell her what was coming before his fists committed. Patterson threw a jab. Testing range. Evelyn did not react. The punch fell 6 inches short. He stepped forward, threw another. This one would have landed, but Evelyn's head moved 4 inches to the left. His knuckles passed her cheek. He committed to a hook. His shoulder dropped 0.3 seconds before his arm moved. The telegraph was clear to anyone who knew how to read intent. Evelyn slipped. Her head moved just enough to let his fist pass her ear. The displacement of air touched her skin. Then she answered. A low kick to his lead thigh. The impact was precise. Peroneal nerve strike. Not the broad muscle of the quadriceps, but the specific nerve bundle that ran down the outside of the leg. Temporary paralysis. His knee buckled. Before he could recover, Evelyn closed the distance. Underhook secured. Hip positioning perfect. The throw was Ogoshi, a judo technique that required timing more than strength. Her foot placement indicated black belt minimum, possibly Nidan. Patterson hit the sand hard. Evelyn transitioned to mount. Knees pinned his biceps. Posture perfect. Her right elbow descended toward his nose, gathering speed, gathering force. It stopped 1 inch from impact. Controlled contact, Corporal. Patterson tapped. 14 seconds had elapsed since the fight began. The murmurs started now, not mockery, not amusement, confusion mixing with the first hints of respect. This was not supposed to be possible. Admin clerks did not move like that. Greenbelts did not execute technique at that level. Who the hell was she? Kane's jaw locked tight. He had organized this session to break her, to drive her out, to prove she did not belong. Instead, he was watching her dismantle his best fighters with efficiency that bordered on contempt. He pointed at 2 more candidates, both tan belts, both confident that numbers would decide the outcome. Both of you, together. A ripple went through the crowd. 2-on-1 was not standard. 2-on-1 was punishment. 2-on-1 was what you did when you wanted to send a message. Callahan stepped forward from the edge. Staff Sergeant Kane, this exceeds. She can refuse, Master Sergeant. They both looked at Evelyn. She stood in the center of the pit sand, clinging to her feet and shins, her face showing nothing. No fear, no hesitation, nothing. I accept. Her voice was flat, cold. The voice of someone who had done this before in places where the stakes were higher than bruised egos and hurt pride. The 2 Marines entered from opposite sides, Corporal Travis Brennan and Corporal Mitchell Hayes. Both infantry, both with deployment experience, both larger than Evelyn by 60 pounds or more. They tried to flank her. Classic pincer movement. Rush from 2 directions, simultaneously overwhelm her ability to defend, use superior numbers to force submission. Evelyn moved before they could coordinate. She closed on Brennan, eliminating the numerical advantage by engaging one before the other could support. Her palm heel struck his solar plexus with surgical precision. The xiphoid processed the small bone at the base of the sternum. The impact caused immediate diaphragm spasm. Brennan folded forward, his body's autonomic response overriding conscious thought. Evelyn pivoted to Hayes. He was already mid-hook, committed to the strike. She redirected his momentum with a forearm block that used his own force against him. Her knee drove into his thigh. Femoral nerve strike. His leg collapsed beneath him. Brennan was recovering, sucking air, trying to straighten. Evelyn swept his ankle. De Ashi Barai. Basic judo. Master-level timing. He hit the sand on his back. She transitioned to side control. Kimura locked on his shoulder. Hyperextension. 2 seconds from dislocation. He tapped. Hayes was struggling to stand, his leg not responding correctly. Evelyn reached him before he could establish base. Arm drag to off-balance him. Back take. Mata Leao. Portuguese for lion killer. The rear naked choke. Blood choke variant. 7 seconds to unconsciousness. He tapped. 21 seconds. Both finished. The pit had gone completely silent. 43 Marines stared at the woman who had just dismantled 4 of their own with efficiency that most of them had only seen in training films. The kind of efficiency that spoke of training beyond what the Marine Corps provided. 4 more. The voice came from somewhere in the crowd. Evelyn could not identify who said it, but the sentiment was clear. They needed to see more. They needed to understand what they were witnessing. Color drained from Kane's face under the floodlights. He had started this. He had organized the session. He had invited her exclusion and humiliation. Now it was spiraling beyond his control, but he could not stop it. Not without admitting he had miscalculated. Not without acknowledging that the admin clerk he had mocked for 5 days was something he had never anticipated. He stepped into the pit himself. 3 others followed. Sergeant Kyle Warner, Corporal Jackson Voss, Sergeant Nolan Cross, all black belts, all with years of training, all with combat experience that should have made this outcome impossible. 4 against 1. Callahan pushed forward to the pit's edge. His expression revealed nothing, but he did not stop what was happening. He needed to see this. He needed to understand what Evelyn Thorne actually was beneath the carefully constructed facade. The 4 spread out, trying to encircle her. They had learned from watching. No more sequential attacks. No more individual engagement. They would come together, use their numbers, overwhelm her ability to respond. Evelyn breathed. The world slowed. Not literally, not magically, but the way it always slowed when she accessed the state Kate Blackwood had taught her to find. The state where thought became irrelevant and instinct took control. She moved. The first caught an elbow to the jaw that snapped his head sideways and dropped him to one knee. Cross. The elbow had been perfectly angled, perfectly timed. Maximum force transfer with minimum windup. The second received a front kick to the sternum that enfolded him. Voss. Evelyn followed with a knee to his forehead as he doubled over. Controlled. Not enough to cause serious injury. Just enough to end his participation. The third managed to grip her wrist. Warner. He was good. He had actual grappling skills. But Evelyn rolled with his grip, used his own grip against him, converted his control into momentum for a hip throw that put him on his back. Kane was last. He was the best of them, and he knew it. He shot in low, perfect, level change textbook. Double leg takedown, the technique that had worked against every opponent he had ever faced. The technique that had earned him his black belt and his reputation. Evelyn sprawled, but she did not go for the guillotine. Instead, she transitioned to his back as his drive carried him forward. Her hooks sank around his hips. Her arm threaded across his throat. The rear naked choke was textbook. Forearm across the carotid arteries. Other hand securing the grip behind his head. Legs controlling his torso so he could not turn or roll free. Kane fought. He gripped her arm, trying to create space between her forearm and his neck. He tucked his chin, defending the choke. He attempted to bridge, to shake her off, to use his superior size and strength to escape. Every technique he knew, every instinct screaming for survival. Nothing worked. 7 seconds later, his palm hit the sand. Tap, tap, tap. Evelyn held the choke exactly 1 second longer. Not enough to injure, just enough to make a point. Then she released and stood. 8 Marines, 45 seconds, complete silence. The floodlights hummed. Somewhere in the distance, traffic moved on the highway beyond the base. The wind carried the smell of sage and dry earth from the hills. But inside the circle of witnesses, there was no sound except breathing. Heavy breathing from the men on the sand. Controlled breathing from the woman standing over them. Callahan stepped onto the sand. His boots left impressions next to the marks left by bodies Evelyn had put there. "Who the hell are you?" Evelyn wiped sand from her palms. Her breathing remained steady. Her face showed nothing. "Staff Sergeant Evelyn Thorne, Greenbelt, Administrative Support." Callahan's jaw tightened. His eyes moved across her face with an intensity that felt like physical force. That was not Greenbelt technique. Those transitions, that timing, that is not something taught in any standard course. He stepped closer. "Where did you actually train?" "The training I received does not appear in my service record, Master Sergeant." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer I'm authorized to provide." From beyond the crowd, a voice cut through the silence. "Master Sergeant Callahan." Everyone turned. A woman in service uniform approached from the administrative building. Her stride was unhurried but purposeful. Silver eagles gleamed on her collar. Colonel Rebecca Stone, commanding officer of the training battalion, had arrived. She had not been expected. Her presence here at an unofficial training session at night meant something had happened. Someone had made a call. Colonel Stone stopped at the edge of the pit. Her eyes moved across the scene with the precision of someone who had spent 3 decades reading situations that could turn deadly in seconds. 8 Marines in various states of recovery, sand disturbed by impacts. Evelyn Thorne standing at the center, her breathing barely elevated, her face revealing nothing. "Master Sergeant Callahan." Stone's voice carried the weight of command. "Step over here." Callahan moved to her position immediately. His posture shifted from authority to deference in an instant. "Ma'am, I received a call from Quantico 30 minutes ago." Stone's voice was low enough that only Callahan could hear clearly, but fragments carried to the crowd. "From someone whose name will not be spoken in this setting. I was informed that one of my course candidates has a background I was not previously aware of." She looked directly at Evelyn. "Staff Sergeant Thorne, do you understand why I am here?" Evelyn's expression did not change. "Yes, ma'am, I believe I do." Callahan's confusion was visible now. His jaw worked silently, processing implications he could not yet articulate. Stone addressed him directly, but her voice carried now. She wanted the entire formation to hear what came next. "Staff Sergeant Thorne spent 2 years attached to Marine Special Operations Command under the Cultural Support Program, Advanced Element." A pause. Let the words settle. "Her training includes close quarters combat instruction from sources I am not cleared to specify. Her operational history includes deployments that do not officially exist to locations where we were never officially present." The silence that followed was absolute. 43 people trying to reconcile what they had just witnessed with what they were now being told. Callahan stared at Evelyn with an expression that bordered on disbelief. Everything he had observed over the past 5 days, every assumption he had made, every conclusion he had drawn, all of it collapsed in a single moment. "If her training is that advanced," he said slowly, "why does her record show a green belt?" "Because the training she actually received was never entered into any official system." Stone's tone remained level. "What she demonstrated tonight represents baseline capability for the program she served in. She paused again, choosing her next words carefully. The reason she's attending this course is that the program no longer exists in its previous form. The master gunnery sergeant who recruited and mentored her was killed in action 6 months ago. Staff Sergeant Thorne requested return to conventional service. That transition requires formalizing qualifications she can actually acknowledge. Kane had managed to stand. Sand still clung to his uniform. He stared at Evelyn with an expression that combined disbelief with something approaching fear. Who was her mentor? Callahan asked. Stone paused. This was classified information, but the situation had moved beyond normal protocols. Master Gunnery Sergeant Catherine Blackwood, 31 years of service. The most decorated female operator in Marine Corps history, though most of those decorations are classified. Something shifted in Evelyn's face, the first visible crack in her control. Hearing Kate's name spoken aloud by someone who understood what it meant struck her with unexpected force. Master Gunnery Sergeant Blackwood trained her personally, Stone continued, for 2 years, in techniques and methodologies that most Marines will never see. Callahan's voice had changed. The skepticism was gone, replaced by something that sounded almost like awe. I met Blackwood once, Quantico 2019, instructor exchange program. She put 3 black belt instructors on the ground during a demonstration and made it look effortless. Staff Sergeant Thorne was her final protege. Stone turned to face the crowd of Marines still gathered around the pit. What you witnessed tonight was not an anomaly. It was not luck. It was the result of training that most of you will never receive, an experience that none of you want to imagine. She let the words settle. Staff Sergeant Thorne came to this course to disappear, to become ordinary again, to stop being what the Marine Corps made her and become something that could be acknowledged in official records. Stone looked at Evelyn. That option no longer appears available. No, ma'am, Evelyn said quietly. It does not. The crowd began to disperse slowly, candidates moving away in small groups, voices lowered. The energy had shifted from anticipation of entertainment to something else entirely. They had come to watch a lamb get slaughtered. Instead, they had witnessed a wolf reveal itself. Fisher lingered at the pit's edge. His face still carried the flush from the guillotine choke, but his expression had transformed. The contempt was gone. In its place was the look of a man whose entire understanding of the world had just been dismantled. He watched Evelyn walk away and said nothing. What could he say? What words existed for this? Margaret Sullivan approached Colonel Stone as the last candidates disappeared into the darkness. You handled that well, ma'am. Then Stone turned. She had not seen Sullivan in the shadows. Gunny, you were here. I was. I saw the whole thing. Sullivan smiled. I told her this afternoon to show them what Kate taught her. I didn't expect her to be quite so thorough. You knew. I recognized Kate's work the moment I saw her move. Took me about 3 hours of observation. Callahan and Kane had 5 days and missed it completely. Stone shook her head. Men see what they expect to see. They saw a small woman with admin credentials and stopped looking. You saw a warrior hiding in plain sight. Kate would have been proud of her. Kate would have told her she's not finished yet. Sullivan nodded slowly. That was true. Kate Blackwood had never been satisfied with good enough. She had pushed her students beyond every limit they believed they had. She had created operators who could function in environments that would break normal Marines. And now one of those operators was standing in a barracks somewhere on Camp Pendleton, processing what had just happened, trying to understand where her life went from here. Evelyn found Callahan outside the barracks at 2200 hours. She had changed out of her training gear into a clean uniform. Her hair was down now, wet from the shower, hanging past her shoulders. She stood alone, her back against the brick wall, her eyes fixed on something in the distance that existed only in her memory. Staff Sergeant, she straightened slightly. Master Sergeant, I owe you an apology. Evelyn turned to face him. His expression carried weight she had not expected from a man who had spent 11 years breaking Marines and building warriors. You don't owe me anything, Master Sergeant. I do. Callahan moved closer, his voice low enough that only she could hear. 5 days ago, I looked at you and saw a tourist. Someone who wanted a bullet point on her evaluation without understanding what any of this actually meant. I was wrong. You were protecting your Marines, protecting the standards that keep them alive. I was protecting my assumptions. He shook his head. There's a difference. One saves lives. The other gets people killed. Evelyn studied him. The hardness she had observed during her first day was still present, but something beneath it had softened. Colonel Stone mentioned Catherine Blackwood, he said quietly. I said I met her once. Briefly. Callahan's eyes grew distant. I was a young staff sergeant convinced I understood hand-to-hand combat because I had been doing it for 10 years. Blackwood walked into that room at Quantico like she owned it. 52 years old at the time, silver hair, didn't look like anything special. He paused. Three of us volunteered to demonstrate techniques with her. She put us all on the ground in under a minute, not with speed, not with power, with something I still can't fully describe, like she knew what we were going to do before we did it. She called it reading intent, Evelyn said, the ability to see the movement before it happens. She taught you that? She taught me everything. The silence between them lasted several seconds. What happened in Yemen? Callahan asked finally. Colonel Stone said she was killed during extraction. Evelyn's face tightened. The crack in her control widened slightly. The mission was compromised. Someone on the inside sold us out. Enemy forces were waiting when the helicopter arrived. Her voice remained steady, but her eyes carried shadows. Kate pushed me through the door as the aircraft took fire. She stayed behind to provide cover. The helicopter went down. She didn't survive. She saved your life. She gave her life. There's a difference. Callahan nodded slowly. He understood that difference better than most. He had lost friends in combat. He had watched men die protecting others. He knew the weight survivors carried. The last thing she said to me, Evelyn continued, was that the measure of an operator wasn't how many enemies they stopped. It was how many allies they created. She looked at the building where 43 Marines were processing what they had witnessed. I didn't fully understand what she meant until this week. Do you understand now? I think I'm starting to. Callahan extended his hand. Tomorrow, 0800. Colonel Stone wants to discuss your assignment going forward. I'd like you there. Evelyn took his hand. His grip was firm, respectful. I'll be there, Master Sergeant. He walked away, leaving her alone with the darkness and the weight of memories she could never fully escape. But before she could return to her quarters, another figure emerged from the shadows. Derek Kane. His face was composed now, the fear and confusion from earlier replaced by something more complicated. Shame mixed with determination. Staff Sergeant Thorne. Staff Sergeant Kane. He approached slowly, keeping distance between them. Respectful distance. I organized tonight, the 4-on-1. I wanted to break you. Evelyn said nothing. She had known this conversation was coming. You knew, Kane's voice cracked slightly. You knew and you still accepted. You weren't trying to break me. You were protecting your Marines. You saw someone you thought was a liability, someone who would get people killed, and you tried to drive her out before that could happen. She paused. Wrong method, right instinct. Kane's composure fractured. His eyes reddened, though no tears fell. Master Gunnery Sergeant Blackwood. I met her. Quantico 2019. Same instructor exchange where Master Sergeant Callahan met her. She was 51 then. She put three of us on the ground in under 90 seconds and looked bored doing it. That was her being gentle. The silence stretched. I thought she was a legend, a story that got exaggerated with each telling. But you're real. What she taught you is real. Everything I thought I understood about combat was incomplete. Evelyn met his eyes. You're a skilled fighter, Staff Sergeant. Everything you've learned has value. But there are levels beyond what the Marine Corps teaches in standard programs. Kate spent 31 years exploring those levels. What I showed tonight was a fraction of what she knew. Can you teach it? The question hung in the air. Some of it? The techniques, yes. The mindset, maybe. The experience that only comes from situations none of us want to encounter. Kane nodded slowly. I want to learn. Whatever you're willing to teach, however long it takes. 0600 tomorrow. The pit. Bring Fisher Patterson, all 8 who faced me tonight. They'll come. I know. Kane walked away, leaving Evelyn alone again. But this time the solitude felt different. Less like isolation and more like the quiet before something new began. She returned to her quarters, sat on the edge of her rack, pulled the photograph from beneath her pillow. Kate Blackwood's face smiled at her from the worn paper. Unchanged despite everything that had happened. Eternal in the way photographs made people eternal, freezing them in moments that could never return. I think I finally understand what you meant, Evelyn whispered to the image. About allies being more valuable than enemies. About finding something that keeps you human. She traced the edge of Kate's face with her thumb. You told me once that the hardest part of our work was the silence. The missions no one would acknowledge. The skills that could never be discussed. Her voice dropped lower. I don't want to live in silence anymore. I want to take what you gave me and pass it on. Openly. officially, in a way that spreads further than we ever could alone. She set the photograph on the small desk propped against the lamp so Kate's image faced the room. This is what you wanted for me, isn't it? Not more operations, not more killing, but this, building something that outlasts both of us. For the first time since Yemen, Evelyn felt the grief transform into something different. Not healed, never fully healed, but integrated. Part of who she was instead of something that controlled her. Thank you, she whispered, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. She lay back on the rack, but sleep did not come immediately. Her mind replayed the 45 seconds in the pit. Not with satisfaction, not with pride, but with analysis. What had worked? What could have been better? How she could teach these techniques to Marines who did not have her background. That was the challenge now, not proving herself. She had done that. The challenge was translating 2 years of intensive training from the world's best close quarters combat instructors into something that could be absorbed in weeks by students with conventional backgrounds. Kate had been able to do it. Kate had taken raw recruits and turned them into operators capable of functioning in environments that would break normal Marines. If Evelyn was truly Kate's protege, truly her legacy, then she had to be able to do the same. Around 300, her phone vibrated against the metal desk. She reached for it, expecting a message from Callahan or Stone about the morning meeting. Instead, she saw an unknown number. The message was simple. The video has been shared beyond secure channels. Recommend increased security protocols. Your location may be compromised. No signature, no identification. But Evelyn knew who it was from. Someone in the intelligence community who had been monitoring her since Yemen. Someone who understood that her return to conventional service had never truly hidden her from the people who wanted her dead. She had killed 2 men in Libya, saved 12 hostages, destroyed a trafficking network that had been operating for years. The people behind that network had never forgotten. They had never forgiven. And now, thanks to a video that had gone viral across military networks, they knew she was alive. They knew she was stateside. They knew where to look. Evelyn deleted the message and set the phone aside. She had known this day would come eventually. You could not operate in the shadows for 2 years and expect to disappear completely when you stepped into the light. The question was what she would do about it. Hide, run, or prepare for what was coming and face it head on. She looked at Kate's photograph. Kate would never have run. Kate would have prepared, would have fortified her position, would have turned the threat into an opportunity to teach her students one final lesson. The difference between training and reality. The difference between controlled sparring and actual combat. The difference between theory and practice. If Viktor Volkov wanted to find her, let him come. When he did, she would not face him alone. She would have 8 Marines she had just begun training. Marines who were about to learn what it meant when training became real. Evelyn finally slept, but her dreams were filled with helicopters falling from the sky and Kate Blackwood's last words echoing across 6 months of grief and guilt. The measure of a warrior is the allies they create. Tomorrow she would start creating those allies in earnest. Tomorrow, the real work began. The meeting with Colonel Stone took place at 800 precisely in her office at battalion headquarters. Evelyn arrived in service uniform, her appearance regulation perfect. Callahan was already present, standing at parade rest beside the colonel's desk. Stone did not waste time with preliminaries. Staff Sergeant Thorne, I'm recommending your immediate certification at the black belt level based on demonstrated proficiency. I'm also recommending your assignment as assistant instructor for the duration of this course under Master Sergeant Callahan's supervision. Evelyn processed the words carefully. Ma'am, I came here to complete the standard qualification, not to receive special treatment. This isn't special treatment. Stone's tone left no room for argument. This is the appropriate application of your capabilities. You have skills these candidates need to learn. Keeping you in a student role would waste resources and deny them training that could save their lives. Callahan spoke for the first time. I've reviewed the curriculum. There are modules where your expertise exceeds mine. Close quarters combat without weapons. Techniques for operators working in isolation. Methods of engagement when you're outweighed and outnumbered. He held her gaze. You want me to teach what I did last night? I want you to teach how you did what you did last night. Those 8 Marines are going to train other Marines. What you showed them, what you could teach them, will spread further than anything they'll learn from standard instruction. Evelyn considered the offer. Everything she had planned, the quiet completion of the course, the anonymous return to conventional service, the disappearance into ordinary duty, All of it evaporated in the face of what they were proposing. The candidates who tried to break me, she said slowly, they become my students. Stone nodded. If you accept. The irony was not lost on Evelyn. The men who had mocked her, isolated her, attempted to humiliate her would now learn from her. I accept, ma'am. Callahan allowed himself a small nod of satisfaction. One more thing, Stone said. The men you defeated last night, Fisher, Kane, the others, they need to hear what happened directly from you. Not the classified details, but enough to understand who they were actually facing. You want me to explain myself to them. I want you to give them the chance to respect what they saw instead of resenting it. Stone leaned forward. Right now, half of them are processing embarrassment. The other half are processing fear. Neither emotion helps them become better Marines. What they need is context. Evelyn understood. The revelation of her background had been necessary to explain last night's outcome. But revelation without relationship created distance. If she was going to teach these men, she needed them to see her as something other than a mystery wrapped in classified files. When, ma'am, tonight 1800 hours. I've arranged for the candidates to assemble in the briefing room. I'll be there, ma'am. The briefing room held all 43 candidates seated in rows of metal chairs. The atmosphere was different from the combat pit. No bloodlust, no anticipation of entertainment, just uncertainty, curiosity, and the residual tension of men whose understanding of the world had been shattered. Evelyn walked to the front of the room alone. Callahan and the other instructors remained outside. This was her moment, her opportunity to bridge the gap between what she was and what they could learn from her. She faced them without notes, without props, without anything except her presence and her words. 18 months ago, I was in a compound in Libya. The room went completely still. Intelligence had identified a human trafficking operation. 12 women were being held inside, scheduled for transport to buyers in 3 countries. Standard assault would have resulted in the hostages being killed before extraction. No one moved. No one spoke. I went in alone. Local clothing, a concealed blade, my training. She paused, letting them understand what that meant, what it required, what the stakes had been. 2 men tried to stop me from reaching the holding room where the women were caged. They did not succeed. Fisher was seated in the front row. His face showed the marks of internal struggle, trying to reconcile the woman standing before him with the admin clerk he had slammed into the sand 5 days ago. I'm not telling you this to impress you. I'm telling you because you need to understand something about what happened last night. Evelyn's eyes moved across the room, meeting the gazes of men who had underestimated her. Every single one of you looked at me and saw weakness. You saw my gender, my service record, and you drew conclusions. Those conclusions almost got you hurt. Kane shifted in his seat. His jaw was tight. In combat, assumptions kill faster than bullets. The enemy you underestimate is the enemy who puts you in the ground. She let the words settle. Last night I was not your enemy, but I could have been. And if I had been, some of you would not be sitting here. The silence was absolute. Master Gunnery Sergeant Catherine Blackwood was my mentor. She spent 31 years serving this country in ways that will never be acknowledged. 6 months ago, she died protecting me during an extraction that went wrong. Evelyn's voice remained steady, but something beneath it carried weight that made the temperature in the room seem to drop. The last thing she told me was that the measure of a warrior is not the enemies they stop. It's the allies they create. She looked at Fisher directly. I came to this course to disappear, to stop being what the Marine Corps made me and become something ordinary. That was a mistake. Her voice hardened. What I know, what she taught me, it's not meant to be hidden. It's meant to be passed on. She addressed the room again. Starting tomorrow, I'll be serving as assistant instructor for the Advanced Combatives module. You can resent me for what happened last night. You can fear me, or you can learn from me. She paused. The choice is yours. The silence lasted several seconds. Then Fisher stood. Every eye in the room turned to him. Staff Sergeant Thorne. Evelyn turned to face him. What I said on your first day, what I did during the drills, the way I treated you. His voice was rough, like the words were being dragged from somewhere deep. I was wrong. I apologize. The room stirred. Fisher was the last person anyone expected to break first. The biggest, the strongest, the most confident. And here he was standing in front of 42 witnesses, apologizing to the woman he had tried to humiliate. Why? Evelyn asked simply. Because you could have hurt me last night. Really hurt me. But you didn't. You controlled the choke. You released when I tapped. He swallowed hard. That takes more discipline than anything I've ever shown you. Other candidates shifted in their seats. The tension in the room had transformed into something else, something more productive. I want to learn what you know, Fisher continued. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, I want to understand how you did what you did. Evelyn studied him. The arrogance that had defined him 5 days ago was gone. In its place was something raw and genuine. Then show up tomorrow ready to work. She turned back to the room. That goes for all of you. What I teach will be harder than anything else in this course. The techniques require precision, discipline, and the willingness to fail repeatedly before you succeed. But if you commit to learning, I'll commit to teaching. No one spoke. No one needed to. The message had been received. Evelyn walked out of the briefing room without looking back. The first training session began at 0600 the next morning. Evelyn stood at the center of the pit while the 8 Marines she had defeated assembled before her. Fisher was first in line. Kane stood beside him. Patterson, Brennan, Hayes, Warner, Voss, and Cross filled in behind them. Their faces carried varying expressions of determination and residual uncertainty. What I teach will hurt, Evelyn said without preamble. The techniques require your body to do things it was never designed to do. You'll fail more than you succeed. You'll question why you volunteered. She began to move, demonstrating a basic Krav Maga sequence with speed that made the individual components blur together into a single fluid motion. But when someone tries to kill you, she continued, executing a finishing strike that stopped an inch from an imaginary target. You'll remember what you learned here, and you'll survive. Kane raised his hand. Staff Sergeant, permission to speak. Evelyn nodded. Last night, when you had the choke locked on me, you held it 1 extra second after I tapped. Why? The other candidates waited. The question hung in the air. Because you needed to remember how it felt. Evelyn's voice was cold, clinical. The moment when your body realizes it's going to lose consciousness. The moment when your training fails and survival becomes the only thought. That memory will make you faster next time. It will make you tap earlier when you're teaching others. And it will make you understand that in real combat, there is no extra second. There is only the moment when you buy more or the moment when they do. Kane absorbed the answer. Something in his expression shifted from resentment toward understanding. Today we start with fundamentals, Yulin announced. Economy of motion, reading intent, control without excessive force. She looked at each of them in turn. Partner drills, Fisher with Kane, Patterson with Brennan. Rotate every 5 minutes, she paused. Begin. The training that followed was unlike anything the candidates had experienced. Evelyn moved between pairs, correcting form with precision that bordered on surgical. Her adjustments were small but transformative. A slight shift in hip position that doubled the power of a throw. An alteration in grip that turned a weak choke into an inescapable one. Fisher absorbed everything. His size became an asset rather than a liability as he learned to redirect momentum instead of relying on raw strength. By the end of the first hour, his technique had improved more than it had in the previous 5 days combined. Kane struggled more. His existing training conflicted with what Evelyn taught. The habits he had built over years resisted the changes she demanded. You're anticipating, Evelyn told him during a pause. You're deciding what I'm going to do before I do it, and then you're wrong. How do I stop? Stop thinking, start seeing. She moved into a ready stance. When I attack, defend. Kane threw a jab. Evelyn was not where he expected. His fist passed through empty air as she appeared at his side, her hand resting lightly on his throat. You telegraphed with your shoulder. You shifted your weight before your arm moved. You looked where you intended to strike. She removed her hand. Your body announced your intentions 3 different ways. I simply listened. How long does it take to learn to do that? Evelyn considered the question. For most people, years. For you, less. You already have the physical ability. You just need to unlearn the habits that are limiting you. Kane's frustration was visible. And if I can't, then you'll be exactly as capable as you were before you met me. Dangerous, skilled, effective. She paused, but not exceptional. The choice is whether that's enough for you. He returned to drilling without another word, but his movements changed, slightly slower, more deliberate, focused on sensation rather than execution. It was a beginning. By the end of the first week, the transformation was visible. The 8 candidates Evelyn trained had separated from the others in capability. Their movements had become more efficient. Their reactions had become faster. Their understanding of combat had deepened in ways standard instruction could not provide. Callahan observed from the pit's edge during a session on day 7. You're reaching them, he said quietly. Evelyn watched Fisher execute a technique she had demonstrated 3 days earlier. His form was not perfect, but it was functional. More importantly, it was his. They're reaching themselves, she replied. I just showed them where to look. Blackwood would be proud of you. The words struck harder than Evelyn expected. Her composure wavered for just a moment before she brought it back under control. She would tell me I'm not finished yet. Callahan nodded. Then let's make sure you finish what you started. But on the afternoon of day 12, everything changed. The call came at 03:15 hours. Evelyn's phone vibrated against the metal desk in her quarters as pulling her from shallow sleep. Thorne? Staff Sergeant, this is Colonel Stone. I need you in my office in 10 minutes. Don't change into uniform. Come as you are. The line went dead. Evelyn was on her feet before the implications fully registered. She pulled on PT gear and moved through darkened corridors at a pace just short of running. Callahan was already there when she arrived, his face carrying an expression she had never seen on him. Something closer to controlled fury. Beside him stood a man in civilian clothes. Tall, thin, with the kind of forgettable face that was deliberately cultivated. Staff Sergeant Thorne. His voice was flat, professional. My name is Agent Walker. I'm with the Defense Intelligence Agency. Evelyn's blood went cold. What happened? Walker glanced at Stone, who nodded permission. 6 hours ago, we intercepted communications from a cell operating in Eastern Europe. They referenced an operation in Libya 18 months ago. Specifically, they referenced the American operative who killed 2 of their associates during a rescue operation. Evelyn's hands remained steady, but her pulse accelerated. They have my identity. Not yet, but they have a description. Female young trained in close quarters combat attached to a unit that doesn't officially exist. Walker's eyes locked onto hers. They're offering $3 million for information leading to your identification. Callahan stepped forward. How did they connect the Libya operation to her? We don't know yet. We're investigating potential leaks. Walker paused. But there's another complication. The cell isn't just looking for revenge. They're planning something. The communications referenced a timeline, something happening within the next 72 hours on American soil. Stone spoke for the first time since Evelyn entered. They want you involved in the response, Staff Sergeant. Your knowledge of their methods, their personnel, their operational patterns. Evelyn processed the request. The quiet life she had built over the past 2 weeks evaporated. I'm no longer part of Ghost Element. My clearances were downgraded. Your clearances can be reinstated within the hour, Walker said. What we need to know is whether you're willing. Evelyn thought about Kate Blackwood, about the helicopter going down, about the promise she had made to herself. But she also thought about what those men in Libya had been doing, the 12 women they had been preparing to sell. What exactly do you need from me? Walker reached into his jacket and produced a tablet. On the screen was a photograph of a man she recognized immediately, Viktor Volkov, the leader of the trafficking network she had dismantled in Libya. She had assumed he was dead. He survived, Walker said, and he's been rebuilding. The operation you disrupted cost him millions in revenue. He spent the last 18 months planning retaliation. Against me specifically. Against everything connected to you. The intelligence suggests he's identified your training background as Marine affiliated. Walker paused. And we believe the video from your pit session may have accelerated his timeline. Someone in Eastern Europe saw it, recognized the technique, confirmed you're alive and stateside. The video. Margaret Sullivan had filmed the 45-second sequence. It had leaked beyond secure networks. You want me to consult, Evelyn said slowly. Help you identify patterns and predict targets. Initially, yes. But if the situation develops, if his assets become active, we may need more than consultation. The unspoken words were clear. I have conditions. Walker waited. The candidates I've been training stay protected. If Volkov's people are looking for connections to Marine installations, this base becomes a potential target. I want additional security protocols implemented immediately. Done. I want my 8 students briefed on the threat. They deserve to know. They're not cleared for, then clear them, or I tell them anyway. Stone cut in. Do it, Agent Walker. Staff Sergeant Thorne is correct. Walker nodded. What else? If Volkov's assets become active on American soil, I'm not staying in a consulting home. I've seen what these people do. If there's an opportunity to stop them directly, I'm taking it. Staff Sergeant, Stone said sharply, that's not a decision you can make unilaterally. With respect, Colonel, that's exactly the decision I'm trained to make. The Ghost Element program existed because there are situations where conventional response isn't fast enough. If Volkov is planning what I think he's planning, you're going to need someone who can operate outside normal parameters. The silence that followed was heavy. I'll make the call to Quantico, Stone said finally. No promises, but I'll advocate for whatever authority you need. Evelyn nodded once. Then let's get started. The briefing lasted 3 hours. By 700, Evelyn had identified the most likely scenario. He's not coming himself, she told the assembled analysts. Volkov doesn't operate that way. He'll send a team, 6 operators, maybe 8, professionals with military backgrounds. Target, Walker asked. Evelyn studied the map of Southern California. Somewhere close to this base. Somewhere that sends a message. He wants me to know it's personal. Callahan spoke for the first time. You think this base is the target? I think I'm the target. The base is just where he expects to find me. Stone stood. Then we fortify, increase perimeter security, brief all personnel on elevated threat conditions. She turned to Evelyn. And you prepare your 8 students. If Volkov's team attempts infiltration, they may be the ones who have to respond before QRF can mobilize. Evelyn felt something shift inside her. The line between training and reality was about to disappear. At 1800 hours, Evelyn assembled her 8 in the pit. Training is over, she said without preamble. This is real. She told them everything. Libya, Viktor Volkov, the threat to the base, the possibility that within 72 hours they might face actual combat against professionals who wanted them dead. Fisher's face had gone pale. Kane's jaw was set. Patterson looked focused. You're telling us this because we might have to fight, Kane said. I'm telling you this because you deserve to know, and because if it happens, I need you ready. We're ready, Fisher said immediately. No, you're not. Evelyn's voice was hard. You've learned techniques. You've improved your skills. But you haven't done this for real. When someone is actually trying to kill you, everything changes. Fear makes you faster or it makes you freeze. She looked at each of them. The next 3 days we trained differently, harder, scenario-based, full contact with protective gear. You're going to learn what it feels like when training stops being theoretical. And if they come before we're ready, Hayes asked. Evelyn's expression did not change. Then you use what you know and you trust that it's enough, because it has to be. For the next 2 days, Evelyn drove them harder than they had ever been driven. Scenarios simulating ambush, multiple attackers, limited visibility, weapons retention, everything compressed into 48 hours that felt like weeks. On the evening of the second day, the perimeter alarm sounded. North Gate. 6 unknowns attempting infiltration. Evelyn's phone lit up with the alert. She grabbed her gear and sent a group text to her 8 students. Rally Point Bravo. Full kit. This is real. 5 minutes. 8 responses came back within 30 seconds. En route. She ran through the darkness toward the North Gate, her mind shifting into the state Kate Blackwood had taught her to find. The state where everything slowed and fear became fuel. This was what all the preparation had been for. When students became warriors or froze and died. When the multiplication effect Kate had envisioned either worked or failed. Evelyn reached the rally point 2 minutes before her students. They arrived in full combat gear, faces hard, eyes focused. No fear visible, just determination. 6 hostiles attempting breach at north perimeter, she said. Security forces engaged. We're backup. Rules of engagement, Kane asked. Detain if possible. Neutralize if necessary. These are professionals. They will not hesitate to kill you. She looked at each of them. Everything you've learned. This is when it matters. They moved as a team toward the North Gate. Tactical spacing, hand signals. The training Evelyn had drilled into them, manifesting in coordinated movement. Gunfire ahead. Security forces holding position, but outnumbered. 6 operators in tactical gear pushing toward the interior of the base. Evelyn's team flanked left. She used hand signals to position them. Fisher and Kane forward. Patterson and Brennan support. The others providing cover. The engagement was not clean. It was not Hollywood. It was chaos and violence, and Marines using everything they had learned to survive against professionals who had done this before. But it worked. Fisher took down the first hostile with a takedown that put the man face first into concrete. Kane secured the second with a chokehold that left the operative unconscious in 8 seconds. Patterson and Brennan worked together to neutralize a third. Evelyn engaged the fourth herself. He was good, trained, but armed with a knife. But she was better. Krav Maga knife defense. Disarm. Wrist break. Throat strike that dropped him without killing him. The final 2 operators saw their team falling and attempted to retreat. Security forces cut off their escape. Within 3 minutes of contact, all 6 hostels were secured. Zero friendly casualties. Evelyn's 8 students stood among the detained operators, breathing hard, adrenaline still surging, but alive and functional. "Is he here?" Fisher asked. "Volkov." "No," Evelyn said. "He sent them. He's never here." But among the detained operators, one carried a phone. Evelyn took it, scrolled through recent messages, found what she was looking for. An address, Los Angeles, Warehouse District, Volkov's location. She looked at her 8 students, looked at what they had just accomplished, looked at what Kate Blackwood had started and what Evelyn was continuing. "The multiplication effect works," she said quietly. Stone and Walker arrived minutes later. The base went into lockdown. The detained operators were processed. But Evelyn had what she needed. The next morning, Colonel Stone called her to headquarters one final time. "Volkov's location has been confirmed. A team is being assembled for capture or elimination." "I want to go." "I know you do, and you will, but not as an operator." Stone's expression softened slightly. "You've built something here, Staff Sergeant. In 2 weeks, you've created a training and methodology that works. You've taken conventional Marines and given them capabilities that saved lives last night. That's more valuable than one more operation." Kate would have gone. Kate Blackwood operated in shadows because that's what the mission required. You have the chance to operate in the light, to build a legacy that spreads further than any single operation ever could. Evelyn was silent for a long moment. "What are you offering, ma'am?" "Permanent assignment as senior instructor, advanced close quarters combat. You build a program, you train Marines who train other Marines. You create the multiplication effect Master Gunnery Sergeant Blackwood envisioned." And Stone stood. "One operator can be in one place at a time. One instructor can train hundreds, who can be in hundreds of places. Which has more impact?" Evelyn thought about the 45 seconds in the pit, thought about her 8 students successfully defending the base last night, thought about Kate's last words echoing across 6 months of grief. "The measure of a warrior is the allies they create." "I accept, ma'am." Stone nodded. The team moved on Volkov's location at 0600 this morning. He was taken into custody without incident. He's being transferred to federal detention pending trial. She paused. "You were right about him not being at the base. He was coordinating from Los Angeles the entire time, sending his people to die while he stayed safe." Evelyn felt something settle inside her. Not satisfaction, not revenge, just completion. Kate used to say that men like Volkov always made the same mistake. They thought their wealth and distance would protect them. They never understood that justice has long arms. "She was right," Stone said. "And because of you, 12 women from Libya are alive. 6 operatives are in custody. And Volkov will spend the rest of his life in a cell." 6 months later, a new course cycle began. 63 candidates assembled in the pit behind Building 247, among them a young lieutenant named Bridget Connolly with logistics credentials and a Greenbelt qualification that did not match her movement. Margaret Sullivan approached Evelyn as the candidates filed in. "Recognize her." Evelyn studied Connolly's posture, her weight distribution, the way she carried herself. Kate trained her. For 8 months, right before Yemen, she thought she was the only one left. Evelyn approached Connolly after the initial briefing. "Your mentor, silver hair, 53 when she died. Yemen, September last year." Connolly's eyes flooded with tears. "You knew Kate. She saved my life, gave me everything I am." They embraced, 2 ghosts finding each other, 2 students of the same master carrying forward a legacy that would not die. Evelyn had established a new tradition, the Blackwood Standard, a scoreboard mounted at the pit's edge. 45 seconds, 8 Marines. Thorn Standard, March 2024. Below it, Blackwood Legacy Program at established 2024. Below that, Master Gunnery Sergeant Catherine Blackwood, 1971 to 2023. And below that, the quote, "The measure of a warrior is the allies they create." Current count, allies created 189 and counting. Every course, the best candidates faced Evelyn, not to win, to learn in real time what pressure felt like, what it meant to face someone better, what it required to keep fighting when you were outmatched. The current record was held by Derek Kane, 38 seconds before he tapped to a triangle choke. When someone breaks 45, Evelyn had announced, "I buy the beer." No one had broken it yet, but they kept trying, and in trying they kept learning, kept improving, kept spreading what Kate Blackwood had built through one protege into a legacy that touched thousands. On a quiet evening 6 months after the pit fight, Evelyn sat alone with Kate's photograph. The worn paper showed 2 women in Libya, master and student. past and future. I understand now, Evelyn whispered. You didn't train me to be the best operator. You trained me to create operators better than me. She traced Kate's face with her thumb. The 8 from that first night have trained in 189 more. Those 189 are training thousands across the fleet. The multiplication effect is working. She smiled at the photograph. The 45 seconds everyone talks about, that wasn't my victory. That was yours, echoing forward through time. Bridget Connolly appeared at the door. Staff Sergeant new candidates arrived Monday. 71 this time. Evelyn tucked the photograph away. Then we should rest. Tomorrow we start building. The scoreboard stood against the setting sun. The numbers would keep growing. The allies would keep multiplying. And somewhere in whatever place existed beyond death, Kate Blackwood was watching her legacy spread further than she had ever imagined possible. 45 seconds had changed everything. But it was what came after those 45 seconds that mattered. The teaching, the mentorship, the transformation of warriors into forges that created more warriors. Evelyn Thorne had arrived at Camp Pendleton as a ghost trying to disappear. She had become a legend building legacies, and the multiplication continued.